Hello and welcome to the Met Office 10-day trend. Now in any 10-day weather period, there's always a lot going on, but this next 10 days does seem to have, well, even the kitchen sink thrown in for good measure. Just take the next 5 days, for example. We're going to go from warm and sunny on Wednesday to wet and windy for many by Friday as Storm Callum approaches. Storm Callum named by the Irish Met Service earlier on Wednesday because across parts of Ireland we are likely to see some very wet and windy weather. Now the storm will bring some wet and windy weather across the UK, but also some warm weather. We can throw in another W as well because there are warnings in force for the rain and wind through Friday and Saturday across the UK. Make sure you keep up to date with those. Once Storm Callum is out of the way, well, Sunday may bring some sunshine before next week. Well, eyes are on what happens to what is currently Hurricane Michael. By the time it approaches the UK, or gets close anyway, it will be an ex-hurricane, but it does have the potential to bring more wet and windy weather as we go through next week. Just the potential at this stage. Let's take a look at the really big picture because over in the United States, the Panhandle bearing the brunt of Hurricane Michael at the time of recording. But of more immediate concern for the UK is this area of low pressure. It doesn't look much, it looks fairly innocuous. But as we run through Wednesday night into Thursday, just watch as that storm starts to intensify. More isobars coming out of it, the winds picking up around it. Why is it intensifying? Well, look high up in the atmosphere at the jet stream. It's really powering this storm, and actually the low pressure system will cross from the warm side to the cold side, and that really is what intensifies Storm Callum as we go through Thursday. And by the time we get to Friday, well, the storm's become quite mature. Look at the number of isobars on it now. Now, the tightly packed isobars are really across southern parts of Ireland. That's why the Irish Met Service have named this storm. The actual low pressure system, the storm itself, looks like staying well to the west and then moving up to the northwest of Scotland. But it does still bring some strong winds across the UK, particularly for Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland. That's where we have warnings in force. So strong winds pretty much everywhere on Friday, but to say the most potentially damaging gusts of wind in the far northwest. And then the focus turns to this wriggling weather front because that's going to bring some heavy rain on Friday and then into the weekend. Just watch as this conveyor belt of rain continues over parts of Western England, Wales and southern Scotland. Some heavy rain mixed in there, and it could last for 24, 36 hours or more in some locations. So that is the next area of concern into Saturday, heavy rain. We do have warnings in force for that as well. Now, ahead of this cold front, there's some really warm air tucked in as well. So that's going to be another feature of the weather this weekend. If it's not raining on Saturday, and for parts of East Anglia in the southeast, it may not do. It could just stay very warm on Saturday. But that cold front will move through, it looks like, and eventually take its rain away during the weekend. Some uncertainty on the timings of that, but it should be clearing away through Sunday. It may linger across eastern areas. And then look at this, a little bump in the isobars, a little ridge of high pressure. It doesn't last long, but it should last long enough to bring quite a few places some sunshine on Sunday, and then potentially quite a cold night on Sunday night into Monday morning. That takes us into the new working week, of course, and then we start to look out in the Atlantic, and our eyes are turning to whatever happens to Hurricane Michael. Now, it may well develop into what won't be a hurricane, but an area of low pressure crossing the Atlantic, and could be in this kind of position on Sunday. But a lot has got to happen to this system. It's got to cross the United States and then cross most of the Atlantic. So there is a lot of uncertainty about the position of Michael, and there's certainly even more uncertainty about what happens as it approaches the UK. Before you get concerned that it's going to come barreling in across the UK and bring more wet and windy weather, well, let me just show you this scenario as the storm system looks like it's going to affect the UK, but then it just kind of fizzles out and trickles south down the Bay of Biscay. Now, that's just one potential scenario of what could happen to ex-Hurricane Michael. A lot of the other computer models have it tied into this area of low pressure, which draws up some of the warmth and energy from Michael and brings a spell of wet and windy weather across the UK. But there is a bit of uncertainty, it has to be said, because this is a highly energized system and it's got a long way to travel. It's certainly something we'll be keeping a very close eye on over the next few days. Whatever happens to Michael, the main weather patterns as we go through next week will set up something like this, with low pressure systems coming in from the Atlantic, high pressure across the continent, keeping things perhaps a little drier across the south, but low pressure systems promising southwesterly winds, and also bouts of wet and windy weather as we go through much of next week. So through next week, there's that uncertainty about Michael, what happens to what is currently Hurricane Michael across the United States. But the main themes are it may well stay unsettled with further wind and rain. And that is a long way off. That's next week. Even before that, lots going on. Please keep up to date with those Met Office weather warnings over the next 3 or 4 days. You can do that on the Met Office website or through our app, or of course follow us on social media.